Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Wow, would you look at that? Another anti-cop activist turns out to be a run-of-the-mill criminal who hates that cops get in the way of him preying on vulnerable members of the public. It really is that simple. They like to sprinkle some barely coherent ideology of racial justice over the top of this real reason, but it really is just as simple as criminals don't like cops. But we all pretend the real reason has to do with something about racism or socioeconomic factors. Didn't El Salvador teach us that the root cause of criminality is criminals? Lock up the criminals and humiliate them in their undies for all the world to see, tattooed gangbangers brought down low, and guess what? Crime almost evaporates overnight, even though all those systemic issues like poverty, well, they still exist. So anywho, over in Atlanta, Georgia, the supposed reverend and executive director of the Beloved Community Ministries, which journalist Andy Ngo equates to a BLM-style nonprofit, was just arrested for crashing a stolen car, injuring people with it, and then fleeing the scene of the crime. 33-year-old Matthew Johnson is no stranger to news cameras in the Atlanta area because he likes to pontificate in front of them to talk about how evil Cop City is, the police training center which has been the target of left-wing militant ire throughout its entire construction. BLM and Antifa foot soldiers literally camp out in the trees surrounding it like they're North Vietnamese communist soldiers, and then from time to time they lob incendiary bombs or shoot at cops. At least one of their militants was killed when cops finally fired back, and another 61 were arrested just last month on RICO charges. But going back to Johnson, a real man of the people we're supposed to believe, well, he was at the Express Oil Change and Tire Shop, and after paying for work done on his own beat-up SUV, he saw that the keys for a really nice Mercedes-Benz were still lying on the counter. So when the employee left or turned his back, Johnson allegedly reached over and snagged those keys instead. And then when he jumped into the Mercedes, the shop manager tried to stop him, but Johnson reportedly took off anyway, drove erratically like a man driving a stolen car through traffic would, and then eventually his evil decisions caught up with him, and so he hit a truck, caused it to flip over several times, as you can see, significantly injuring the other driver. That truck then crashed into yet more cars. Johnson got stuck in the massive pileup, so he ditched the stolen car and ran until a cop tackled him and cuffed him. Is he going to blame white supremacy for that too? The ghost of Jim Crow possessed his arm against his will and gave him sticky fingers for a luxury vehicle. I mean, come on. We need to ditch liberalism ASAP. Human beings have free will and plenty of people just choose to do evil. Not because of a bunch of socioeconomic or societal reasons, but because they covet their neighbor's goods. And they don't care what anyone has to say about it. And when you mix that with an ideology that literally preaches that stealing is a moral obligation of getting back at the white man and that adhering to societal norms is beyond the pale because it reinforces the racist system, then you have a recipe for disaster. A similar story is happening in Chicago, where the transparency group CWB Chicago just got surveillance footage from a reticent city which tried to block them at every turn about an incident which happened back in May of this year, allegedly showing a neon-vested peacekeeper taking part in the ambush attack and robbery of a driver. Again, criminals who hate cops are like, I'm going to be the cop instead, think that cops are just power-hungry pigs because they assume that's how people in power always are, and they just want to be the bully with a gun. There's no conception on this part of the left that actually there are plenty of good people who wear the badge out of self-sacrifice and not self-gain. Now, maybe not as much in Chicago because pretty much anything related to the government over there is surely corrupt, even law enforcement, but still, you get what I'm saying. But that's not to say that everyone who believes in wokeism does so for merely political ends. There are plenty of true ideological adherents who naively believe the gruel they feed the rest of us. Now, tragically, a young Antifa activist named Ryan Carson was just stabbed to death early in the morning in the streets of New York while leaving a wedding with his Antifa girlfriend who has a Karl Marx license plate. It appears his girlfriend refused to give cops a description of the assailant, likely because he's black, as surveillance video shows, and her friends have set up a GoFundMe so that she could get money and time off work instead of pay for his funeral costs. They're kind of grifting off his death. Then you have friends of Ryan's telling the media that he would feel sorry for the guy who stabbed him to death if he were still alive today, and that he would see the perp as merely a victim of a broken system. Again, that's liberalism for you. No one chooses evil, it's just foisted on us by factors outside of our control.